In this video, we will be discussing plant and flower usage in Shakespeare's play Hamlet, as well as the effect the motif had on the people of Shakespeare's time, given the cultural aspect of flowers and gardens. Even today, England is famed for the English-style garden, and, also like today, English-style gardens have been known for both their abundance and multifaceted uses. Primarily, the English gardens of Shakespeare's time served two main purposes: to serve as a pantry of herbs and medicines, and also to serve as a social gathering place by using more decorative flowers. Given the fact that spices, herbs, and medicines were botanically based during the 16th and 17th centuries, it was very important for each household to have an herbal garden before having a garden centralized around holding social events. Because of this, many people were familiar with common herbs such as barley, sage, leeks, basil, chives, cilantro, and many others. Although it was a first priority to have an herbal garden, the more wealthy citizens of England were able to also use their gardens as one focused more on beauty and entertainment purposes. These particular gardens had the plants and flowers that Shakespeare used more in his plays, which include rosemaries, roses, pansies, daisies, and other flowers and blossoms that will be discussed later in this video. Even though we don't know the very specifics of Shakespeare's childhood, we can infer that, being the middle-class citizen he was, that he was very familiar with flowers and plants, therefore influencing many of the texts he wrote. Historian Jessica Kerr, in fact, mentioned that before he started writing plays, Shakespeare liked to use flowers as images to describe his ideas about people. Above all, he used flowers and, for the most part, the same wild flowers which still grow in the fields or by the river near his home. When we read Hamlet today and see the plant imagery he incorporates into his monologues and other texts, we often aren't very impressed by what it has to say. Because of this, it's very important to ask, why does Shakespeare choose to use flowers to describe the images and ideas in his plays? In order to fully analyze this, it's important to look at a few key points. First off, compared to today's environment, people in Shakespeare's time were constantly surrounded by nature, making Shakespeare's references to plants and flowers much more effective. This being said, people's lives actually were affected when they saw the plants in their gardens start to rot, rather than how we might react if we saw the grass in our backyard starting to lose its lush green color. A rotting garden, in fact, could have meant extreme hardships to a household without the herbs and medicines they needed to stay healthy. So, when we look at the text Hamlet, Hamlet says that the world is like an unweeded garden. When reading this, it's important to not compare it to a garden that we know, such as the small gardens in our front yards, but instead as a majestic English-style garden becoming incompetent and invaded by ugly weeds that steal the nutrients that should be received by the plants. Now this metaphor becomes much more profound. We will be discussing more examples of these smaller references to plants during the presentation itself. But another key point to understand about Shakespeare's use of plants and flowers in Hamlet and other texts is that this botanic motif was very effective, since people in Shakespeare's time tended to be very superstitious when it came to the power of herbs and their ability to create potions, elixirs, and even poisons. Shakespeare probably knew the gist of potions because of the herbs he saw in his mother's kitchen, and Shakespeare, simply by saying that a potion was brewed by someone or something evil, was able to use potions effectively in his texts, especially with Claudius's killing of old Hamlet and the poisoned foil and cup of wine in the final act of Hamlet. As mentioned before, we will be talking about more examples of plant and flower references in the presentation. However, it is very important to discuss the major references to plants and flowers, which primarily is Act 4, Scene 5, where Ophelia goes insane and hands flowers to Laertes.
In Act 4, Scene 5, Ophelia proceeds to go mad at the news of her father's death. She sings as people speak to her and makes little sense when she does speak, but a lot of what she does still has meaning. She proceeds to give flowers, weeds, and herbs to Laertes, the king, and the queen. Each plant is a symbol of what she is feeling in relation to her father's death. In this scene, she mentions rosemary, roses, pansies, fennel, columbines, daisies, violets, and rue. She says that the pansies she gives are for thought. Well, the name pansy was derived from the French word penser, which means thought. Moreover, its nickname, Herb of Grace to Sundays, is fitting because repentance is to be followed by forgiveness, often given on the Christian holy day of Sunday. Ophelia also mentions violets. Violets are a very important part of many of Shakespeare's works. Violets are beautiful, sweet-smelling flowers, but Shakespeare often uses them when he wishes to allude to sadness or death. This is because violets have a short lifespan. When Ophelia mentions that all of the violets withered when her father died, she means to say that his life was short just as the flowers' lives are. In Act 4, Scene 7, the queen tells Laertes that Ophelia has drowned. Ophelia drowned with a garland upon her head. In that garland were crowflowers, which are often used in garlands, and nettles. Nettles are weeds that grow in locations in place of flowers and have a sharp, painful sting when touched. Shakespeare often mentions nettles in many of his works to symbolize evil or pain. It is obvious that Ophelia is grieving her father, but she may also be grieving Hamlet's love. This can be inferred by some of the flowers mentioned in her madness and in her death. Willow trees are known to droop, as if with sadness, which is fitting since Ophelia was grieving her father. However, the willow is a tree that during Shakespeare's time was also associated with unrequited love. Ophelia mentions fennel and columbines as well. In Elizabethan times, columbines were emblems of forsaken lovers and ingratitude. Fennel was an emblem of flattery. It has been suggested by some writers like Lucille F. Newman that the mention of fennel and columbines refer to pregnancy. Fennel and columbines were used in potions to jumpstart abortions and a woman's menstrual cycle at the time. Overall, Shakespeare skillfully refers to plants, herbs, flowers, weeds, and gardens in his texts to relay messages to the audience of his plays. He knew that the audience would be likely to understand because all of this was common knowledge of the times. We will elaborate more on these phenomena in our presentation during class. Thank you very much for watching.